And those soldiers are raising a very important point. Apart from carrying out coups, they are raising an important point. To end the neo-colonial relationship between France and these African countries. You see what is happening in West Africa? A coup takes place in Niger. They remove whoever was president. ECOWAS decides to act against them, including up to the point of even a military intervention. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But because of the way the matter was handled, you've now got 3 countries that have walked out of ECOWAS. It's weakened that regional body. Somebody was telling me the other day that Guinea-Conakry is going to join them.
Thabo Mbeki, South Africa's second post-apartheid president, is a towering figure in African politics and thought. Known for his intellectual depth and Pan-African vision, Mbeki has been a vocal critic of colonialism and its lingering effect on the African continent. Watch and pay attention, and I will share my thought later.
Yeah. The matter that is being raised about good governance and so on the continent is correctly raised. What I would say about that now is that we are currently, there's a discussion going on, there's a process going on the continent to prepare for the election of the new commission of the African Union next year in February. And as you know, part of what the AU decided was that this position of chairperson of the commission should rotate among the regions, African regions. And so the region delegated the task to nominate the next chair candidate is East Africa. So the matter is with the East African region. What I would have expected is that the East African region would get together and say, who among us from East Africa would be the best candidate for this position of chairperson of the AU Commission? They haven't done that. Instead, you have candidates from Tanzania, from Djibouti, from Kenya, from Somalia, from where? Mauritius. 5 candidates from East Africa. And now you send all of these 5 names to the AU must decide which one. It's an incorrect approach. I'm mentioning it because it's actually a vitally important matter. Because there are many, many, many deficiencies with the current Commission of the African Union. And yet that Commission has got a vital task in addressing exactly these matters that you raise about good governance on the continent. It's a body that should be the African Union. We have a whole multiplicity, I keep raising this thing, of policies. The economy of the continent, the politics of the continent, war and peace, the gender question, women's, children's rights. There are policy positions of the African Union, all of these things. But there's no leadership to make sure that these policies are implemented, and that leadership should reside in that commission. So the election of a new chairperson of the commission is a matter of vital importance for the future of the continent. But the East African region is not giving us any candidate except a fleet of 5 candidates. That's a particular struggle that we need to engage, including the issue about the selection of such a candidate. You can't just pop up and say, my name is Thabo Mbeki, I want to be chair. Why? Why must we elect you? I'm saying the very process of the election, we were raising issues about that. That these candidates, there needs to be a particular process, transparent, all of Africa can see it. Ask this person. Ask them about the policies of the AU. What do they know? The practices and rules and regulations and all that. So that by the time you say, we hereby elect you as chairperson, you are confident that you are electing somebody who's actually going to do this practical work of making sure that the continent implements the decisions it's taken. You see what is happening in West Africa? A coup takes place in Niger. They remove whoever was president. ECOWAS decides to act against them, including up to the point of even a military intervention. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But because of the way the matter was handled, you've now got 3 countries that have walked out of ECOWAS. It has weakened that regional body. Somebody was telling me the other day that Guinea-Conakry is going to join them. But I'm saying, here's the AU. The AU has got a very important committee called the Committee of the Panel of the Wise. They ought to have seen this thing to say there's problems coming here. How to intervene? There's no intervention. And those soldiers are raising a very important point. Apart from carrying out coups, they are raising an important point. To end the neo-colonial relationship between France and these African countries. So, my brother, I'm saying that the immediate task we have is the reconstitution of the Commission of the African Union in 3-4 months' time to make sure that it provides the kind of leadership that is required. I see the ambassador here of Western Sahara. Welcome. The matter, that important matter of the admission of Morocco into the AU, that raised very important questions about the issue of Western Sahara. That issue remains unresolved. Somebody sent me some video footage just 3-4 days ago of a conference in Japan. And there you have the Japanese envoy beating up physically the representative of the Western Sahara. But I'm saying there's an issue. I saw one of the African countries have now opened a consulate in this territory, which is illegally occupied by Morocco. And the African Union is nowhere to be seen, despite its own policy positions on this matter. That's why this matter about who constitutes the leadership in the Commission of the AU next year becomes of critical importance. Not about the answers, but about the questions. On Sudan, I must put this matter delicately. We are in contact with the Sudanese players. I'm talking about Sudan, the Republic of Sudan. The belligerents, the civilian organizations, with a view to saying to all of them the same thing I was saying about the Eastern DRC. What's the problem? What's the solution? From the Sudanese people themselves. So in brief, therefore, my brother, my response to this is that, again, I'm now talking from the position of the foundation. We are in touch with all of the belligerents, engaged with them to help to find a solution to the problem. It's clear that the initiatives that have been taken so far, like the Jeddah process with Americans and Saudi Arabia and so on, to find a peaceful solution hasn't worked. Even this last conference that the Americans convened in Geneva, the government, General Buhan, didn't attend. But I'm saying we are in contact with all of these players with a view to saying, what can we do in order to assist to find a solution? And as you indicated, the one advantage we have is that we've been working, I've been working on the matter of Sudan since 2009, as you indicated, as a consequence of which we're very familiar with the country's challenges. We know quite a lot of the people there, and a lot of them know us, so we're not strangers to one another. And that is why, as I say, when we intervene and say we'll talk to everybody, nobody says go away. I can't say more than that. There will be a conference here next month, October, dealing with issues of peace on the continent. And the Sudan matter serves on that agenda. It will be discussed by the Sudanese themselves, with us here. And all I'm saying is that there is an intervention that we're making with regard to the conflict in Sudan. With regard to Burundi, I must confess, I wouldn't know what exactly is happening in detail in Burundi now. But I think that with regard to the matters that we thought needed to be addressed, the original negotiations that took place in Arusha, and Mandela inherited from Mwalimu Nyerere, the intervention when there was an agreement and we had to send troops to Burundi to protect that government, everything, the negotiations between the armed groups, the FDD and all of that, to lay down arms, all of those interventions which were necessary to bring stability and democracy to Burundi happened. And it seemed to us that we had done what needed to be done with regard to Burundi. I'm not saying the situation is okay. I'm saying I'm not sure what the situation is currently. But in terms of the interventions that had to be made then, to bring to a situation where the Burundi are in a position freely to determine their own future and destiny, that was done. We did what we could. It may very well be that with your advice, we might have to go back again and see what's happening now. But the challenges that were there then, I thought we had done our best to help to address those. But I'm saying that I think we're open to any suggestion from yourselves as to say, but the current situation in Burundi is as follows, in order to say what therefore can be done to respond to the current situation. I'm talking about the situation in the past. The issue about just transition, and the point that is being raised is correct. I mean, as developing countries, even the international negotiations on these climate issues, they talk about common but differentiated responses. That differentiation is to take into account the fact that they are developing countries. So there's no expectation that what is expected of America or France or England is necessarily what is expected of the developing countries. So I think that that differentiated response is a very important element in the international negotiations. And I think we as developing countries must bear that in mind and take advantage of that. I mean, take the situation here at home. There is no way that we can provide electricity here without relying in part on the base stations that produce electricity. That's the coal-fired stations. And indeed, what needs to happen is that those coal-fired power stations need renovation. The point that is being raised that they are very old, they are 40 years old, 50 years old, and so is correct. And to respond to that is not necessarily to say shut it down, but to renovate it so that we do indeed have this very strong base, in addition to which you then do the renewables. And I hope the country will take that position. There's a very active discussion taking place with regard to that, to say that fortunately, as you would have seen, one of the documents issued by department before they got changed, Minerals and Energy, it distributed a document 4 or 5 months ago, which said, let's extend the life of the coal-fired power stations, which were supposed to be retired by this and that, by 10 years. It said that it's an official document of government in order to allow the space for the renovation of these stations. So that, as I say, you have this base in terms of production of electricity, to which you then add the renewables. So that would be, I'm sure, that should be our approach to this matter about climate change and this just transition. Part of what has happened, the issue that is raised about the African Renaissance, part of what has happened in the continent, and don't ask me why, is a very, very clear decline in the levels of commitment to a Pan-African perspective. You see it everywhere, it's very visible. So the matter of a renaissance of the continent, it suffers that kind of fate. When this commitment to a Pan-African perspective dies away, and people are very preoccupied with what happens in my country, which is justified, but does not mean you focus on your country to the exclusion of the continent. But I'm saying there's been a retreat from that Pan-African perspective. It affects this African Renaissance thing. It's in the leadership. It's in our political leadership on the continent. It's not among the masses of the people. The masses of the people continue to share this view that as a continent we share the same destiny. What do we do together? In that context, the matter that again raised, I hope that the national dialogue I'm talking about will address this issue, which is a matter of great debate in this country, about the so-called undocumented people. You know, colleagues, the people to, let me say, since the beginning of diamond mining in the 19th century, later gold mining and all of that, this country has seen lots of Africans from the rest of the continent moving to this country. The issue of many other Africans being present with us is not new. And historically, the indigenous African community has never ever been hostile to other Africans coming from other African countries. Take the old townships, Alexander Township in Johannesburg. That township has always had people from all over the continent. With no friction, with no nothing. Historically, the African community here has never been xenophobic about other Africans. So, 2008, we're way past 6 o'clock now. 2008, all manner of trouble breaks out in Alexander Township in Johannesburg. Attack on these foreigners, particularly Zimbabweans. Then it spread elsewhere. Xenophobia, Afrophobia. So me, I say, when I saw that thing, I was in government, I was president. I say, but this is not, it's not Alexander Township. Alex for decades has had Zimbabweans and Mozambicans and this and that, and never ever this conflict. Why? There's a mistake we made as government, and not to disclassify an intelligence document about what happened in Alexander 2008. That thing was organized to drive the Zimbabweans out of the country back to Zimbabwe because there were elections in Zimbabwe. It was people who were being driven out, they were going to vote against Bob Mugabe. An intelligence report which has got the names and the dates and venues where people met and planned this and so on. It's presented as a xenophobic attack by the people of Alex against it. It was wrong. It was organized, systematic for a political purpose. I'm saying the mistake we made, we should have declassified that intelligence report. It's got the names and the dates and the venues of the meetings which were organized in order to produce this outcome. We've got many, many challenges of the economy here. Unemployment, very serious problem. Economy is in crisis. I'm a former president of this country. And you'll never ever convince me that this economy is in crisis because of foreigners. It's not true. It's not true. It's because there's certain things that have happened with regard to the economy which have produced economic crisis, resulting, among other things, in unemployment. So we've got to solve this problem. We've got to deal with this economy and deal with these problems of unemployment. At the same time, the country has got laws about migration of people. Let's enforce the laws. You can't just come in illegally. Yeah. So the thing about the registration of people undocumented is correct. But I'm saying, like we have an economic crisis, it's incorrect to think that that economic crisis is caused by people who have come from the rest of the world.
Mbeki often reminds us that the root of Africa's modern challenges lies in the colonial project, which divided the continent arbitrarily, disrupted indigenous governance, and exploited its people and resources. For Mbeki, colonialism was not just an act of physical conquest, but also a psychological assault. It sought to erase African identities, culture, and knowledge system. Through his concept of the African Resonance, Mbeki calls for a revival of Africa's cultural, economic, and political power. He argues that true liberation requires dismantling neo-colonial systems that keep the continent dependent on external powers. Mbeki critiques how global institutions often perpetuate economic colonialism through unfair trade policies, debt traps, and exploitative practices by multinational corporations. He calls for African unity as a solution to these systemic challenges. A staunch Pan-Africanist, Mbeki advocates for continental solidarity and stronger institutions like the African Union to counter external interference and foster homegrown solutions. For Mbeki, education is a powerful tool to decolonize the mind and empower future generations to challenge inequality and assert African agency. And there you have it, guys. Kindly like this video and share your thoughts in the comment box below. Until next time, cheers and have a good one.